All right, let's dive right into the latest financials for Tianjin Pharmaceutical Da Ren Tang Group, because honestly, there's a pretty big puzzle sitting right on the surface of their annual report. So today, we're going to break down the numbers and figure out what's really going on from an investor's point of view.
Okay, so take a look at this. Right out of the gate, you've got two numbers that they don't seem to add up. First, revenue. It absolutely plummeted by 33%. That's a third of their sales just gone compared to the year before.
Right. But then you look at the profit, the bottom line, and it barely moved. It's only down 5%. Now that is the kind of thing that really makes you stop and ask, wait a second.
Exactly. How is that even possible? I mean, when a company's sales fall off a cliff like that, you expect profits to go right along with it. A 33% drop in revenue should have blown a huge hole in their profits. So what happened? That's the big mystery we're going to solve here. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look closer at that tale of two numbers. Then, we'll start solving the profit puzzle by following the money trail. After that, we'll check on the company's overall financial health, figure out where all the cash went, and then wrap it all up with the big investor takeaway. So, just to be super clear on the core mystery here, revenue is down by a third, but profit is only down 5%. Normally, less money coming in the front door means way less money left over at the end of the day. The fact that didn't happen here, well, it tells us something really unusual is going on under the hood. It's a real head-scratcher. Okay, so to solve this, we're going to have to put on our financial detective hats. And the investigation starts in one key place, the income statement. This is the document that lists all the company's sales and all its costs. The clues we're looking for, they're hidden right in there.
That's exactly right. You can think of the income statement as the financial story of the company for the past year. It starts with all the money they brought in at the top, and then it subtracts all the costs on the way down to the final profit number at the bottom. Somewhere between that top line and that bottom line, we're going to find our answer.
And here it is, our first huge clue. The company's cost of sales, that's what it costs them to actually produce the stuff they sell, was slashed by an unbelievable 65% this year. So let's break that down. It means that even though they were selling less, they got dramatically better and cheaper at making their products. This massive cost-cutting was the first piece of the puzzle. It basically acted like a huge shield, protecting their profit margins from that big drop in sales. In fact, if you dig in, their gross profit actually went up by 3%.
But as impressive as that is, it's still not the whole story. The real smoking gun, the thing that explains most of the mystery, is this: a one-time gain of over 1.5 billion RMB from selling off part of another company.
And this analogy just hits the nail on the head. That 1.5 billion went straight to their profit line, but it didn't come from their actual day-to-day business. It was a one-off deal. It really is like selling your vintage car to pay the bills. Yeah, it gets you through the month, but you can't sell that car again next month. It's not a sustainable way to make a living.
Okay, so mystery solved. A combo of some serious cost-cutting and a huge one-time asset sale protected their profit. But that leads to the next question. What did all of this do to the company's overall financial health? To figure that out, we have to turn to the balance sheet.
And wow, the balance sheet tells another really dramatic story. Just look at these two lines. First, cash. The amount of cash they had on hand just collapsed. It's down 65%. At the exact same time, their trade payables, which is just the money they owe to their suppliers in the short term, shot up by 82%.
So what does that trade-off really mean? Well, to put it simply, their short-term financial position got a lot weaker. They have way less cash in the bank and a much bigger pile of bills they need to pay soon. It's kind of like looking at your own finances and seeing less money in your checking account while your credit card bill just about doubled.
Which brings us to the next obvious question, right? They had that huge gain from selling an asset. So why is their cash balance so low? Where did all that money actually go? To find out, we have to look at our third and final financial document, the cash flow statement. The cash flow statement is all about tracking the movement of money. And what we see here is that the cash coming from their core business, what we call cash from operating activities, got cut by more than half and went from almost 900 million RMB down to just over 400 million. So think about that. The main business is bringing in a lot less cash, but at the same time, the company was spending huge amounts of money. They paid out a massive dividend to their shareholders, almost 2.9 billion RMB, and they made nearly 6 billion RMB in new investments. These two things alone just dwarfed the cash that the actual business was generating. All right, so we've gone through the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. We've gathered all the clues.
Now let's put it all together into a clear takeaway for an investor.
Okay, so let's start with the good. There's no denying they successfully protected their profit number, which is pretty impressive given that revenue drop. They did it with a huge cut in their cost of sales, so much so that their gross profit actually went up. But then you have the not-so-good side of the coin. That profit number leaned really heavily on that one-time asset sale that you can't repeat. At the same time, the cash from the actual business fell by more than half, cash reserves were down 65%, and their short-term debts went up 82%. So you're left with this picture of, on one hand, some real operational strength, but on the other hand, some serious financial engineering and a much weaker balance sheet.
Which really leaves us with the big question that any investor has to ask themselves. Do you look at this and see clever financial management that navigated a really tough year and delivered value to shareholders with that big dividend? Or do you see it as a major red flag, where a one-time gain is just masking some pretty serious weakness in the core business? The answer really depends on your perspective. This content is intended to serve strictly and only as an informational, independent, objective summary of recent events and should in no way be interpreted, construed, or relied upon by any party as inside information or financial advice.